Get ready for the fascinating and somewhat eerie story of Coca-Cola, how a struggling pharmacist with a drug addiction came up with the formula, how the original founder died in poverty while others took over his legacy, and how this drink came to be what it is today. I'll also tell you about some of the questionable things the company did during the World War II, their groundbreaking advertising campaign that skyrocketed Coca-Cola to the top, and how in the following decades they aggressively bought out the other beverage companies to dominate the market. Let's go. Our first chapter is about how this addicted pharmacist created the formula for Coca-Cola. The story of Coca-Cola really begins with its founder, John Pemberton, a pharmacist from Atlanta. He graduated from pharmacy school and started his career, but in 1865, during the American Civil War, he was wounded in the Battle of Columbus. Like many veterans at the time, he became addicted to morphine, which was commonly prescribed for pain relief and highly addictive. As a pharmacist, Pemberton experimented with different ways to overcome his addiction, eventually developing a tonic based on cocoa leaves and wine, inspired by the popular drink at the time, Vin Mariani. However, in 1885, when prohibition laws were enacted in certain states, he had to rethink the formula. He removed the alcohol and replaced it with the caramelized sugar syrup combined with the carbonation. At the time, this sweet but still unnamed drink was sold in local pharmacies, but for just 5 cents per glass, and was marketed as a remedy for morphine addiction and opium withdrawal. Later, it was promoted as a cure for depression and other illness, essentially a miracle drink. Interestingly, in the beginning, Coca-Cola wasn't sold in bottles or cans. Pharmacies simply served it in glasses. And to Pemberton's surprise, the drink quickly gained popularity. 20 years after creating it, he had his own pharmaceutical company. And one day, he asked his bookkeeper, Frank Robinson, to come up with the catchy name and the logo for the drink. Something easy to remember, and that's how the iconic Coca-Cola name and its famous script logo were born. The name came from its key ingredients, cocoa leaves and cola nuts. The next chapter takes us to the birth of Coca-Cola Company. In 1888, Pemberton passed away from stomach cancer at the age of 57, never having made a fortune from his invention. That same year, a businessman named Asa Candler bought the formula for mere $2,300, about $71,000 in today's money. Candler made some game-changing moves. He built a factory to mass-produce the drink and officially registered the Coca-Cola Company in 1892. Understanding the power of marketing, he launched the bold advertising campaign right from the start. One of his first strategies was to offer free samples in pharmacies in exchange for the addresses of the wealthy customers. They would then send free samples to those customers who, after trying it, would have to went to stores looking to buy more. Another innovative marketing tactic, giving away branded merchandise. These efforts created a loyal customer base and skyrocketed demand. Coca-Cola also cleverly positioned itself as a healthier alternative to alcohol, promoting it as a refreshing drink that restored energy and quenched thirst. Alright friends, here's an important point. Let me say this again. Up until that moment, Coca-Cola wasn't sold in bottles. But in 1894, Asa was advised, hey, why don't you try selling Coca-Cola in bottles? And that's where the big story really begins. Our next chapter focuses on the company's growth in the 20th century. The first major success came when in 1819, Coca-Cola was selling about 9,000 gallons of syrup, roughly 34,000 liters. But within just 10 years, annual sales skyrocketed to over 1.5 million liters. The company experienced rapid expansion. Looking at Coca-Cola's growth throughout the 20th century, you can see a clear business model. The company sold the syrup to partners who handled bottling and distribution, while Coca-Cola focused on marketing. One of the company's biggest marketing innovations was using celebrity endorsements. In 1900, Asa struck a mutually beneficial deal with the popular actress Hilda Clark, making her the face of Coca-Cola's advertising. And of course, after these celebrity campaigns, the brand sales soared, and more people became aware of Coca-Cola. Let me emphasize this again. Back then, using celebrities in advertising was a groundbreaking marketing strategy. Around the same time, Coca-Cola decided to stop using cocoa leaves in its formula, and in the mid-1910s, the company launched international competition to design a new bottle, something that would distinguish it from competing carbonated drinks. The winning design was now iconic concrete bottle, created by Swedish-born engineer Alexander Samuelsson. Today, it is one of the Coca-Cola's most recognizable symbols. Coca-Cola began investing even more money into marketing. By 1911, their annual marketing budget was the equivalent of $37 million in today's money. Of course, compared to their current spendings, this is not a huge amount, but I'll touch on that later. So they successfully repositioned themselves in consumers' minds from a seasonal summer drinks to a beverage for all seasons. Before that, it was considered purely a summertime refreshment. Asa, who had an interest in politics, ran for a mayor of Atlanta in 1916 and stepped away from his business ventures. Coca-Cola then faced another leadership change, and Asa transferred most of his shares to his children, but his son Howard turned out to be an incompetent and frankly terrible manager. As a result, after just 3 years, the company had to be sold to banker Ernst Woodruff for staggering $25 million. In the same year, Ernst took Coca-Cola public on the New York Stock Exchange, selling 500,000 shares for $40 each. By the summer of 1928, Coca-Cola made its Olympic debut in Amsterdam, bringing several crates of their product. From that moment on, the brand became a permanent fixture at the Olympics, World Championships, and other major sporting events, always serving as a key partner. Around the 1930s, Coca-Cola engineers came up with those signature Coca-Cola coolers and branded cups, which played a major role in the company's marketing efforts. Coca-Cola has always been a marketing genius. Many cultural phenomena we take for granted today were actually created by Coca-Cola simply because they wanted to sell more bottles. Take Santa Claus, for example. The version we all know today was popularized by Coca-Cola. They once depicted him in their ad campaigns, and it's just stuck over time and became such an ingrained cultural image that people don't even associate it with Coca-Cola anymore. Before and during World War II, Coca-Cola was already being sold in over 50 countries. Because of its flexible strategies and unique logistics, Coca-Cola even managed to sell in Nazi Germany. Americans don't like to talk about it, but their beloved brand played both sides during the war. Coca-Cola bottles were openly distributed at Hitler rallies and advertised in Nazi propaganda materials. Eventually, supply chain issues arose, so Coca-Cola's German division, led by Max Keith, decided to create a new product specifically for the German market. This led to the birth of Fanta. During the war, Coca-Cola heavily featured military themes in their advertising, which resonated deeply with public and reinforced the brand's patriotic image. Sales skyrocketed as people saw it as a symbol of national pride. They were the only beverage beverage exempt from the sugar restriction. While most companies struggled during the World War II, Coca-Cola did the opposite. They opened new plants and expanded their global reach. Moving into the 1960s, Coca-Cola continued experimenting with the new products and packaging. Sprite was introduced in 1961 as a response to the rising popularity of 7-Up. Similarly, when Mountain Dew gained traction in 1969, Coca-Cola launched their own competing drink called Simba. This was also the era when Coca-Cola made a major shift to aluminum cans. Before that, they hadn't used them, but once they did, revenue surged. Cans were simply more convenient, and the sound when opening them became an iconic part of their marketing. From the 1970s through the 1990s, Coca-Cola made a series of strategic moves to solidify its market positions. First, they launched their sports drink Olympiade in partnership with the US Olympic Committee. Second, they signed a deal with FIFA and struck agreement with China. In 1982, Coca-Cola even purchased Columbia Pictures for $700 million. Interestingly, the movie Gandhi, produced under Columbia Pictures, won an Oscar for the Best Picture that year. 7 years later, Coca-Cola sold the studio to Sony for a staggering $3 billion, netting an additional $2 billion in profit from the film industry alone. Around the same period, Coca-Cola became more aggressive in acquiring other companies. Previously, they weren't known for this, but once they noticed a beverage gaining popularity, they quickly acquired a stake and integrated it into their portfolio. By the 2010s, Coca-Cola had achieved remarkable success. According to their own reports, by 2005, they were already selling in 200 countries and managed to sell 50 billion cans in a single year. But of course, they faced challenges. Yes, they were the #1 brand in the most countries, but there were regions when their market share was as low as 25%. For example, in the Middle East, Coca-Cola held just 25% of the market, while Pepsi dominated with 75%. They also struggled in places like Scotland and Peru, where they weren't particularly popular. 2010s had the major impact on Coca-Cola's future. First, they started investing even more heavily in advertising campaigns. Each year, Coca-Cola began spending $4 billion purely on marketing, and they became even more aggressive in acquiring competitors. In 2011, they acquired the Romanian stake in Honest Tea, buying 40% of the shares for $43 million. In 2013, they completed the purchase of the Zico, a coconut water company. Then in 2014, they acquired 16% stake in Monster Energy for $2 billion. In 2015, they bought shares in the juice company Suja Life, along with many other acquisitions. However, not all acquisition attempts were successful. Some companies refused to sell. For example, in China, Coca-Cola offered $2.4 billion to acquire Huiyuan Group, a leading juice producer, but they turned it down, recognizing if Coca-Cola entered the Chinese market too aggressively, they'd quickly become a monopoly. They couldn't ignore the meteoric rise of Starbucks. Seeing its massive growth, they decided to buy Costa Coffee for $4.9 billion. In the end, just to put things in the perspective, Coca-Cola's annual revenue today stands at $45 billion. They own an enormous portfolio of brands, and they have become a true cultural phenomenon. We all drink Coca-Cola, and it's an impressive example of business success. Let me know in the comments which company you'd like to hear about next.